Well, top of the morning to you, Lassie. We are making today, Mare, corned beef and cabbage here in the Cavalcade studio. And it's that time of year, of course, St. Patrick's Day, although this is certainly a great meal anytime. And it was always a tradition in our house that on St. Patrick's Day or around it, we would have corned beef and cabbage. Even though we were not Irish, but you know, they say on St. Patrick's Day everybody is Irish or has the Irish spirit. And so we had this growing up, didn't we, Mare?
Yes, we did.
And have made it many a time for a big church dinner. I mean, corned beef and cabbage for 200 people. So I want to talk about what we're going to do. So today we're going to make the corned beef. And let's take a look at it, Mare. This is what they call a flat cut. Now, Marianne, did you know that there are two cuts of corned beef?
Yes, I did.
Yes. So there's a flat cut, which is what we have here. And then there's something called a point cut. Okay? A point cut is smaller, generally, than a flat cut. It's fattier, has more fat. But some people would say that because it has more fat, it has more flavor. And so, but there's less meat on a point cut, and it's generally smaller. And so, point cut has never really worked well for us because we always need to make a lot. And so, rather than buying multiple pieces, we would just get larger, what we call a flat cut. Now, what this really is, Mare, is a brisket, okay, that has been brined with spices. I have some here. This actually came with the corned beef, and a lot of times you'll get a little spice packet with it. Now, the corned beef is already spiced. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be corned beef, okay? But a lot of corned beef companies now, and we have two wonderful corned beef makers in Detroit, and they both make excellent corned beef. And a lot of them include this little packet of pickling spices. And I see different seeds here: mustard, crushed up bay leaves, I don't know what else is in there. Maybe some coriander, some other dill seed. And that's sort of what they use when they process this meat. And this meat is submerged in this brine for some time until the corning, through the corning process, to sort of get those spices infused into the meat. Let's take a look at this piece, Mare. It's pretty thick, as you can see. It's got a membrane here, and it's got some fat on this side. Now, corned beef, because it's a brisket, this is a pretty tough piece of meat. And Marianne, we know that whenever we've got a tough cut of meat, what do we got to do?
Got to cook it for a long time.
A long time. And we're going to cook this corned beef for a long time, probably close to 3 hours. And it's basically boiled, okay, in water for that time, and it simmers many hours. But what that's going to do, just like if you're braising meat, like a pot roast or whatever, that is going to break down all of these connective tissues here in the corned beef, and it's going to really tenderize the meat. It's also going to render a lot of this fat, but the fat is going to give it the flavor. And we know that too, don't we?
Yes.
So how do you get nice tender corned beef? You cook it a long time, and then when it's done, you have to cut it against the grain, right, Mare?
Right.
Against the grain of the meat. Meat is like wood. There is a grain to it. You can see it right here, actually. And I don't know if the camera will pick it up. But what I would want to do is that when it comes slicing time, is I want to cut it this way, because when you cut it against the grain, you're severing those connective tissues, and so that will help make for a nice tender bite. Okay. Now, I have a friend who was born in Ireland and lived a good part of his adult life in Ireland, and we had a conversation about corned beef and cabbage. And he said to me, Kevin, I never even had corned beef growing up. We didn't have it. I mean, you could get it in Ireland, but it wasn't a big deal. Or it was something you got at a deli, right?
Yeah.
This is a very much, corned beef for St. Patrick's Day is a lot like chop suey for Chinese food. They don't have chop suey in China. It's an American thing. And it's an American thing because when Irish immigrants came here, they often lived in neighborhoods, and there was terrible discrimination against the Irish, and they often lived in neighborhoods that were shared with other immigrant populations. And in many cases, when the Irish came to the United States, they lived in neighborhoods where there were Jewish delis, delicatessens, or meat markets. And so the Irish bacon, which is pork, which they were kind of used to having in Ireland, you couldn't get here, but corned beef sort of was like a substitute for that. And that's how it kind of became the tradition. Corned beef. And then I'm not sure about how the cabbage came into play. Of course, potatoes are a very Irish dish. And as a matter of fact, a lot of Irish came to the United States because there was a potato famine. And the potato crops, which they were very reliant on, they all died, and people were starving, and that's why it brought a lot of Irish immigrants to the U.S. And then, of course, carrots. So this is sort of the vegetable part of the meal. So it's meat and potatoes, but cabbage, and everything gets boiled. Okay? The whole kit and caboodle. It all gets boiled in a pot. But we're going to start with the corned beef. And we're actually going to have this meal tomorrow. But because the corned beef takes so long, I actually like to do it ahead of time. And there's a way that you can do it ahead of time. And that's what we're going to do. You could certainly make this all the same day, but it's a lot of time in the kitchen, mostly because of the corned beef. You're not going to do anything special with these vegetables except boil them. The only thing that you could do if you wanted to, Marianne, and some people like to cook the vegetables, or especially the cabbage, in what I would call the corned beef broth or stock. So there's going to be water in this pot that the corned beef cooked in for many hours, and people would then save that water and cook the vegetables, or the cabbage especially, in there. And it would impart, because it's going to have fat, the water will have fat in it, and the water will have the flavor from the corned beef, sort of those spices, and that kind of infuses into the cabbage, which cabbage in and of itself boiled isn't real flavorful, okay? So that's a way to give you sort of more flavor if you want to do it that way. We actually grew up in a house that didn't do it that way. We boiled the vegetables separately, because we like the taste of just the vegetables themselves without the corning spices, which I'm going to put some of these in here. This is a big piece of meat, so we're going to put some of those spices since they gave them to us. So now what I'm going to do, Mayor, is I'm going to take this over to the sink and put some water in here. And you want to cover the meat, by an inch or so at least of water, okay? And this is going to cook for, like I said, probably close to 3 hours. And I'm going to check it every half an hour or so. And as the water evaporates, I'm going to add more so that it keeps cooking. We're going to do this right on the stove. So, once this comes up to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer. We'll come back and show that to you. And it's all part of our fun time making corned beef and cabbage. Okay, Mayor. So here we go. It's starting to bubble. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn the 1951 Calvinator down to simmer. But you see what's going on here? This sort of foam. This is really from the fat, and we're going to keep an eye on this, and I'll skim it every so often, but this is what happens with a lot of meats when you boil it. But it's floating a little bit here on the top, and again I'm going to keep an eye on it. We'll add water to it, but corned beef is on its way. So, can you smell it already? Yeah, it's got that, you're smelling sort of the spices from the meat. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep that covered, and we will check on it every once in a while because some of that water will evaporate, and then we'll add water as needed. But we're in for the long haul now, boiling our corned beef so it gets nice and tender.
Okay.
Oh, whoop. Getting a corned beef facial, Mayor.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me turn this off. And let me bring this over. So it's been nearly 3 hours. And there it is. So you can see it's shrunk down as you would expect. A lot of that fat has rendered off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of here. I'm going to put it on here. And we're just going to let it cool. Okay? And then I'm going to carve it. Now we're going to save this broth, this stock, because again, some people like to boil the vegetables in here. We don't. So what we're going to do is once this cools off a little bit, we're going to cut it, and I'm going to lay it, Mayor, in a baking dish.
Okay.
So I'm going to slice it, and I'm going to put the slices here in this baking dish. Then I'm going to ladle in some of this golden corned beef stock over the meat. Okay?
Okay.
And then I'm going to seal this up, and it will go in the fridge. Then tomorrow, for our corned beef and cabbage dinner, all I need to do is warm this through in a 250 degree oven for a half an hour or so. And while it's doing that, I will boil our potatoes and our carrots and our cabbage. Now I'll also say, and everybody has different traditions, we like to serve wedges of lemon for the cabbage especially, and I know, Marianne, you like to eat your corned beef with a little
Mustard.
mustard on the side, don't you?
Yes.
So that's how we'll eat it. But we'll come back in a few minutes and get this wonderful piece of flat cut corned beef sliced up. So, Mary, I'm going to start carving. Now, here's the bottom. See that layer of fat?
Yes.
We're going to trim that right off. That one looks like it might even have a little piece of meat on there. Doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Very thin. Very, almost a shred. And tender. But once I get this fat off, see the grain?
Yes.
You can really see it. So there's a top piece here. I'm going to kind of slice. It was connected with some tissue, which is now cooked through. So we're going to cut right through there. There we go. And now we have two pieces. And again, this is all fat, this part here, which we don't want. We're going to take that off. Okay, so let me start with this piece. Boy, is this tender. Now, you can see the grain. It's going like this. Do you see it?
Yes, I do.
So that means we're going to cut this corned beef like this. Across, we're going across the grain. And then I'll do the same with the other piece. But look at that. We're going to lay this in our, I've already put a little juice in there. I'm going to just lay this down in our pan here. And I'm going to keep cutting. You can cut as thin or as thick as you like. I like it a little on the thinner side. Of course, it would be excellent. You know, the thinner slice is excellent for sandwiches. Let's see. And I really like to take off as much of this. I'm going to even carve some of this fat down here because we don't want to have to deal with that at the table. We're going to deal with it now. You need a sharp knife. You could also use an electric knife here if you had one. I have quite a few and I'm not using one, but I probably would be a good idea. All right, I'm going to finish carving and we'll come on back and get this all wrapped up. Okie doke. Last little hunk here of corned beef. And I know, Marianne, you tried a little piece, didn't you?
Yes, I snuck a piece.
And what do we think?
It's nice and tender and delicious.
I'm gonna, you know what? Oh, melts in your mouth. This is, again, You cook it. You need to cook it 2.5, 3 hours on a constant simmer, and then cut it across the grain, and your corned beef will come out tender. God, that's good. Okay, now, so this is what you yield from 4. That piece was 4 1/3 pound. So there you go. And I'm glad we didn't get one much smaller, eh?
Yep.
I'm going to ladle a little bit more of this broth in here. There. So the corned beef is done. So tomorrow, let's take some foil. Tomorrow, the job will be to just boil up the potatoes, the carrots, and the cabbage. That's easy. Just a little water, a little salt, and you're all good to go. The hard part, the long part, is done. And it will be an easy thing to just reheat and on a low oven while we're getting our vegetables together and going to enjoy a wonderful corned beef and cabbage dinner. Well, Mare, we are ready for our corned beef and cabbage.
Yum.
So, we just wanted to share with you sort of the final product here. We took you through the corned beef, which is really the hard part of, in that it's hard, the time-consuming part of this whole process. But, Marianne, let's look at the plate here. So everything was boiled, okay? Now, I do it all separately in separate pots. Some people just throw all the vegetables together, but I find they don't all cook at the same time. The potatoes take the longest, but I put the carrots and the potatoes and the cabbage all in separate pots. A little bit more cleanup, but you know what? It's okay. Now, what we like to do is we like to keep a nice lemon wedge here, and the lemon on the cabbage is wonderful. We don't want to seed, but the lemon on the cabbage is just wonderful. Okay, it gives a really nice flavor. Now, on these vegetables, of course, we're Polish, so who doesn't like cabbage, right? But this is so good, and it's, of course, very tender. But I want to say boiling vegetables is probably the least interesting way to prepare them, okay? And I think we all know that. But it's the traditional way for this dish, is to just boil everything. Now, if you want to give it a little update, now we tend to roast vegetables in the oven because it kind of caramelizes them a little bit, brings out their sweetness, doesn't deplete them so much of, a lot of their nutritional value. So the carrots here, Marianne, would be perfect to be roasted if you wanted to do that. They would be a little bit different color. They're sweet. Now, potatoes. I went with a Yukon Gold, which I love because they are so creamy and they have such a nice flavor just themselves. Of course, we could butter these up a little bit. Certainly wouldn't hurt, would it? But they're delicious. So you could use a Yukon Gold. You could use a red skin. Any kind of other sort of what I call a white potato. You want to use a potato that has a thin skin. Okay, Marianne?
Okay.
Like your russets and baking potatoes, those have got a thicker skin. They're not great for boiling. So use something that has a thin skin, like I said, Yukon Gold, a red skin. Here's why I don't use red skins. I love them. They're the same color as the corned beef. And we like a nice variety on the plate. It's pretty, of colors. And then, of course, we have succulent. I don't know how else to describe it. Tender. I put the roast beef in the oven.
Corned beef.
Corned beef, thank you. I put the corned beef in the oven. Remember how we put it in a tray?
Yeah.
We put it in the fridge. I took it from the fridge, put it in a 250-degree oven for, half an hour, 35 minutes, while the vegetables were boiling. And, it's still moist because we put some of that broth in there, remember? And delicious. And it's all done. Here you go. Serve it with a side salad, maybe, some nice rolls, Irish soda bread. If you really want to do the Irish thing, that would be great to have with this as well on the side. We like to put a little dollop of mustard on the side and dip our corn. Well, you put everything in the mustard, don't you, Mary?
Yes, I do.
Dip the corned beef in the mustard. But here it is: corned beef, cabbage, carrots, potatoes. This is how we're celebrating, and we are just grateful that you're here with us, celebrating alongside. Via these videos. If you like what we do, please subscribe, please share. Let us know how you celebrate St. Patrick's Day, or if you have a corned beef and cabbage tradition as well. So we just are thankful for the opportunity to spend some time with you. Marianne, thanks for working the camera.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you next time here on Cavalcade of Food. Bye, everybody.
Bye.